to the What If It's Not Depression Vodcast. I'm your host, Dr. Achina Stein. And today I have a wonderful person who I've been wanting to interview for quite some time. Lately, I've been meeting a lot of practitioners who are working with children, and I do see children from time to time, but it's really nice to get a nice group of people together who are experts in children. I'm generally seeing all ages, from young kids as small as age 4 to as old as 97. So it's really nice to be able to hand off sometimes some people of the younger age group to people like Jess. And I'd like to have you get to know her. So Jess is in Canada, and she is a family health educator specializing in helping busy parents feed their kids for better mood, learning, and stress tolerance. Along with being a certified teacher, Jess is a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, board certified in practical holistic nutrition, and is the author of an international bestseller book called Raising Resilience: Take the Stress Out of Feeding Your Family and Love Your Life, and Not Pulling Your Hair Out Anymore. That last part is what I added. So, because I know I deal with a lot of parents who are in that position. So her book and online resources have reached families all over the world, helping them improve the lives of children with learning differences, anxiety, ADHD, autism, and mood disorders. You can find her at jesssherman.com, and we'll give you the rest of the information about her in the show notes. So welcome, Jess. And if you love this episode, click the like button and subscribe to my channel and let more people know about this and other episodes. And if you are interested in what I do, please go to my website and check out my boot camp. Welcome, Jess.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I love what you're doing. I've been browsing your videos, and it's just so chock full of great information.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate that. Yeah, it's my mission to really tell people a lot about root causes of depression and anxiety, and to understand that there are other ways than just taking medication and doing psychotherapy. There's so many things out there that can help you find your way to great mental health, right?
Yeah, so important right now as things are skyrocketing, right? Like our mental health is in rough shape as a collective. so important.
Absolutely, yes. So I just did an episode with Danny Williamson, who's a nurse practitioner, about the ACE score, right? Mm-hmm. And how trauma can affect your body physiologically, neurophysiologically, and cause all sorts of health issues. And connected to the ACE score is also a resilience score, which we talked a little bit about. I would love for you to sort of connect the dots for people about as with any questionnaire or score, there's going to be limitations. We put these quizzes together to sort of glean some information, but there's always limitations. So when people take the ACE score, it's like, wait, I had all this trauma and it wasn't picked up on the ACE score. Does that mean that's not trauma? And that's not the case, right? Mm-hmm. So I would love for you to talk about that, and also talk about resilience, and you're familiar about the resilience score and how that all ties in.
Yeah, well, I mean, these are all just tools, right? And I think a fundamental difference between what your average medical doctor would do, or care provider would do, and what you and I do, is that we look at the big picture and we pull in all of these tools, and we understand like health is a very multifaceted thing. And we're not treating a condition, we're treating a person. We're helping a person achieve that vitality that they're looking for. And so we have to unpack all of the different pieces that are affecting that vitality. And these are just another set of tools, or other tools that can show us or give us some insight into what affects our vitality, what affects our mood, what affects our behavior, what affects our health. And this understanding that early childhood adverse experiences actually impact kids later in life. I mean, that was groundbreaking. I think it makes sense. Like, it makes intuitive sense. It's not that earth-shattering to consider, but that it made its way into, the data and the journals and the doctor's offices, that was pretty ground shifting, I think. And it's certainly something that I consider as well. The more I learn about early stresses, like, they don't have to be big T traumas, but early stressors and early pressures, and how that shapes biology and how that shapes our way of being in the world. The more I can start to unpack this for parents, of like, because that's what parents want to know, is like, why am I seeing this? What is happening to my child? Why are they so angry? Why are they so frustrated? Why are they can't sleep? Why can't they just be like, a normal kid? And it's like, well, let's unpack that, and let's be really systematic about figuring out what the triggers are. So these are great tools, and I want every parent to know that they're available, but they're not diagnostic of anything.
Exactly.
Right?
They're not diagnostic. It just gives us information from a specific vantage point,
Right.
and it helps you narrow down what are all the pieces. So,
Mm-hmm.
what a child has been through, in their early childhood is one piece. It's just how
Mm-hmm.
they've been, what's been around them. That's what the
Right.
for. And then the resilience piece, there's a resilience score that helps to understand possibly how they responded to those environmental situations. And so,
Mm-hmm.
because there have been people who have been in very traumatic situations but responded very differently, right? And then there's other people, I mean, and came out of it fine, I should say.
Right.
Responded to that horrible situation and quote unquote came out fine. But there's variations of that. But just to simplify the discussion, but there's other people who have been through maybe a milder situation and responded to that in a very different way.
Yeah.
It was extremely traumatic because
Yeah.
of
And
their lack of resiliency, right?
well, yeah, and I would just sort of, it's like, well, let's talk about what resilience is, because that was a real shift in my understanding, that stress has very little to do with the actual event. Stress has much more to do with how the body receives that event.
Exactly.
And so, like, teasing on a school bus could be a major traumatic event for one child because it was received that way, or they can brush it off and they can go along their business, right? And this is what I got really interested in when I was teaching. I was teaching high school, and I was like, what is the difference? Like, what is going on inside these bodies, where one kid is like, yep, got the homework done, got the stuff done, like excelling, super motivated, and then one kid is like literally bouncing off the walls, can't sit still, can't understand a word I'm saying, can't absorb it, and is really anxious about starting anything new because they think they're going to fail. Like, what is the psychology there? And what I realized is that, okay, yes, there's some psychology there, right? And I was like, all right, I get that. We can like change our teaching tools. We can bring in some therapy. We can, but I was like, oh, there's something else going on. There is something else happening here. And that's when I started to understand there's actually biology involved as well. And it's really interesting to me when I look back on my teaching career, that when I got really interested in this and I got frustrated by it, I took a sabbatical from teaching, partly because I was burnt out, but partly because I was really curious to like dig into this. But I didn't want more educational tools. I didn't want to go into special education or something like that. I don't know why. Just intuitively, I was like, no, I want to study nutrition. I want to study biology. I want to study like these kids' bodies. So that's what I did. And that's when, like, wow, light bulb moments went on when I was like, wow, there really is something to resilience that is biological. And it's not necessarily just a skill that we develop. Someone asked me this the other day, like, how do you teach kids to be resilient? And I'm like, I don't think of resilience as a skill. Like, it involves skills. Like, we have to teach kids skills,
Right.
But resilience lies in the body. It is our capacity to tolerate and handle and grow from stress.
Right.
And that is biological. Our stress response is biological.
It is.
So yeah, you can teach a kid all the wonderful resilience tools, and there's some great stuff out there. But if their biology is dysregulated, their nervous system is dysregulated, they're only going to be able to absorb part of what you're feeding them. And with my clients, sometimes they say, it's like, yeah, we've got these tools, but we have to micromanage the kids. Like we have to constantly be there to help them use these tools. And that's the missing piece. When we get their biology sorted out, then they can start to really integrate the therapeutic tools that they're given, the educational tools that they're given, the management tools that they're given, and really like integrate them into a new way of being in the world.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. There are a lot of patients who are very, very good at doing the tools. They're so disciplined. And they're like, I did my tapping and I did my, I looked at my automatic negative thoughts and I really worked on it, and they calm for a bit and then they get triggered again. And so
Yes.
it takes a lot of energy and work on a day-to-day basis to stay on top of it all. And it's exhausting sometimes.
Yeah.
It's because they're not addressing the biology. So I'm so glad.
Exactly.
So glad we're
yeah, and it's so empowering for parents, because ultimately, like, okay, your child is under your roof and you have them, and there is a certain degree of connection. I mean, it varies depending on your relationship and where you're at with your kids, but we do have this biological, attachment situation happening, and we can use that to our advantage. And so there's this time frame where you're like, okay, I see these tendencies in my child. I see these, explosion tendencies or anxiety tendencies or depressive tendencies. How do I set this kid up so that they can eventually leave my home and have a toolbox of strategies available to them that really work, that they know when they go into X, Y, or Z situation and they're going to get triggered like this because that's their tendency, they can do these things. And not only like the breathing things and the tapping things and the meditation things, but also the supplements and the lifestyle things, and how they have tools so that they can get a better night's sleep and stuff like that. So yeah, it's an important time.
Yeah. So let's back up a little bit and really give the audience the definition of what resilience is.
Resilience is just your capacity to grow from stress. And that's changed I've changed it. I used to say it's our capacity to handle stress, to tolerate stress, which it is. But, stress is such an important part of growth, right? It's like, it's inevitable. And in fact, we should be embracing stress, but we don't want it to cripple us. Right? We don't want stress to compound. So we actually want to be able to reflect on stress, grow from stress, and learn from it, and move forward.
Right. Moving from a reacting to stress to responding to stress as a choice, right? Being able to see it coming even and saying, okay, this is going to be stressful. How am I going to respond to it?
Yeah. Understanding our own stress triggers. I mean, this is understanding the language of the nervous system. That's really what resilience is all about. Understanding what is going to happen biologically that we have no control over when we're triggered, and then having tools to widen our window of tolerance to stress so that we don't get triggered as quickly, and then having tools to recognize and bring ourselves back to a state of calm when we are triggered, which is going to be inevitable.
Great. Yeah. So why don't we unpack that a little bit more? Talk more about the biology of stress so that people understand what you're actually talking about.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Yeah. Starting from the beginning. Yeah.
Well, it's what's so interesting about it. If I had known this as a teacher, it would have changed so much. And I love working with teachers to help help teachers kind of see their kids differently, their students differently. When your body is exposed to a stressor, so it's getting a message of threat, it's going to do one of two things. Usually it's going to fight. It's going to jump up to a sympathetic nervous system response state. So we're going to have, this is hormonally driven, right? This is not something that we control. It's hormonally driven. We're going to fight that stressor. Or, and I think usually with kids, usually it's doing that most of the time. The other possibility is it's going to freeze. You're going to go into that dorsal vagal freeze response, which is the shutdown, the it's too much, I can't do it, withdraw. And that we're seeing that more and more in kids as well. And it'll do, and the way I explain this to parents is that usually our response is to fight or flee, that sympathetic response. It's very resource intensive though, to do that. And if our kids are lacking resources, they'll much more quickly go down into that freeze response. And so we're seeing that more often.
Right.
Yeah.
And, I just want to add right there that sometimes looks like depression, looks like apathy, lack of motivation, or even laziness, inattention, when it's really a reaction to stress. That's a shutdown. And many times medications really does nothing to improve. In fact, it might make it worse.
Yeah.
So if a stimulant is added, they actually can get quite depressed or agitated from the stimulants, because that's not the problem. And what you just described is so unrecognized in the traditional world. So unrecognized. So I think it's really important for parents to hear this, that medications don't treat this particular thing by itself. It's really important to look at the biology of stress to the body.
Yeah. So I recorded, this has been like really transformational for a lot of parents in my programs. And so I recorded a little explanation, which is on my website, or jesssherman.com/biology of behavior. And we can link to it. So I kind of explain this a bit more, but what I really want parents to understand is that a child who's going, living most of their life in fight or flight, or living most of their life in freeze, or going back and forth between the two. Like you say, it looks like, they're pushing all your buttons. They're angry, they're reactive. It looks like something is wrong with them, but nothing is wrong with them. This is a totally appropriate response to stress. It's a totally appropriate biological response to stress. But what it tells you is that they're under stress. And it tells you a couple of things. One is, they need more nutrients than the average person. Because whether they're up fighting or they're down freezing, they need nourishment to get them out of that state. And so, it's if you're seeing like Johnny next door gets to eat whatever they want and they're totally emotionally stable, it's like, forget Johnny. Like, let's look at your kid. Your kid is under stress. They need a lot of nourishment. And you're probably in a vicious cycle because your kid probably doesn't want to eat. Maybe they're picky. Maybe you can't get the supplements into them and all of this stuff. So there is a real kind of critical thing to examine there. Are they getting those nutritional building blocks so that they can find their way out of those dysregulated states?
So most people need, I shouldn't say most people, many people have higher requirements for zinc, magnesium, B complex, specifically vitamin B6, folate, and B12. So their levels might be within the normal range, but some bodies do need higher requirement than others.
Yeah, if they're under chronic stress, they're going to be burning through those. And that's another thing I think goes really underrated, is that our stress response is driven by nutrients. And the more, the faster you drive the car, the more gas you use, right? So they are burning through those nutrients because they're under so much stress. And then if they're in that freeze response, I think of that as like, when your computer's low on battery and it like dims everything everything's conserving, right? In order to climb out of that, they need nourishment.
Right. Yeah.
So,
And on
yeah.
the computer, we call it safe mode. It goes into safe mode. You're
Mhm.
absolutely right.
Mhm.
That's a great analogy with the computer because
Mhm.
everybody experiences that. What's going on, right? Yeah.
Mhm. And it poses some parenting challenges too, because you're just like, get off the couch, like, let's get moving, let's go do something together. And they're just like shutting you out, shutting you out. This is a normal response to stress. And it's not okay. It's not like, oh, they're just having a stress response, let's leave them alone. It's not okay. The work comes with figuring out what's causing their body biologically so much stress. And this is another thing that gets missed all the time, which is that the body can't tell the difference between the stress triggered by the fight you just had with your friend or the stress caused by a parasite in your gut,
Right.
right? Or the stress caused by a nutrient imbalance.
Right.
It's same stress hormones are going to be released, right? And back to your original, bringing up the resilience scores and the ACE scores, part of why those early childhood experiences matter is because they dysregulate your cortisol and they dysregulate your nervous system response, and they kind of you were going in this direction, then you had this event, and now your nervous system is going in this direction, and it's been going there ever since, right? You need a lot of biological resources, a lot of nutrition to bring that back into a regulated state. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, there's, you're touching on an area where what you're saying is that there's multiple root causes. So it's basically, in a summary, you're saying that when your child is acting, quote unquote, that's often used word, acting out, right? Or behaving in such a way. Some people don't like that word, but it's also a good description of what's going on, right?
Yeah.
But when your child is behaving in such a way that's sending signals in the parent, like something's going on here, what's going on, rather than judging your child or thinking that they're doing something to push your buttons on purpose, or that they're doing something wrong, or they're being bad or lazy, look at it as, this is a stress response to something. Now I just need to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And you touched on food, nutrition,
Mm-hmm.
right? Food, and you mentioned parasites. So parasites are a type of infection, a chronic infection. There's lots of other infections, foods infections, toxins. We feed our kids tons of toxins and don't even realize it. And we're, all the candy and all the sugar and all the chemicals in our foods, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
just the stress of the environment, whatever that might be. And all that is on top of what we haven't mentioned at all is temperament, right? Every child has a different temperament,
Yep.
So
Yep.
I have three kids, and one, I needed whenever we went on family trips, we had my sister-in-law and her husband, and they have three kids. And so we had three kids. Whenever we went on trips, we had three parents manage my one son and one parent managed the other five kids, because he was the kind of kid that would just take off, right? He was so curious of his environment. He was never afraid. And and we were always like, where is he, where is he? It's like,
Yep.
and I had my daughter who was always holding my hand,
Mm-hmm.
she always needed to be on my hip. So that
Mm-hmm.
temperament, every child has a temperament, and it's all within a normal range. So all of that is also on top of their temperament. So one child,
Mm-hmm.
if they're doing something that doesn't feel right to them, uncomfortable, or even unsafe to them, they might respond differently to a situation than another child, like how you described when you're on the bus being tased by,
Yes,
right?
yes, which is so tricky, especially as a first-time parent, because you're just like, is this normal? Like, and then you're looking at all the other kids in the class, 50% of whom are probably also dysregulated, and you're just like, oh, okay, maybe it is normal. It doesn't mean it's healthy. It doesn't mean it's their optimum, right? And so I tell parents, you gotta tune into your inner idea of what health looks like.
Right.
And if it, and I, you know, not a lot of us are ever asked to do that, but what does health look like and feel like to you? And then look at your child. Is that what health looks like and you think feels like for them? Are they experiencing life in a healthy way? And you get to choose, you get to decide if it meets your standards or not. And if it doesn't, then you know you've got options. But I think looking into these biological stressors that you just mentioned, and when it comes to tendencies, man, I about a year ago now, I started incorporating nutrigenomic testing into my programs, and you know, looking at genetics, looking at genetic tendencies. And man, is it ever fascinating to learn that your child has certain genetic tendencies on like to see it on paper.
Right.
And you know, we have to always be really clear with nutrigenomics that our genes are not our destiny. They don't tell you anything about what's actually happening in the body.
Right.
But what they can tell you, what they can give you insight into, is what your child's tendency will be when they're under stress. Right. And so if you know that they have a tendency to be low in serotonin, for example,
right,
it doesn't tell you that they're depressed, and it doesn't tell you that they are low in serotonin, but it tells you when they are in a stressful situation, they're probably going to show some symptoms of low serotonin. And then all of a sudden you have a tool to help them. You want to reduce that stress, but maybe you have 5-HTP in your pocket, or maybe, you know, you have some tools to support that. You know, they need a little bit more protein than the average person because they need those building blocks. So when you say tendencies, yeah, I mean, rooting there, we've touched on the two things that really impact a child's resilience, impact their capacity to tolerate stress. One is genetics, and one is early adverse experiences. And those really set the stage. They don't tell you they're going to live a life of, you know, depression and anxiety or otherwise, but they set the stage for how the nervous system is likely to respond to stressful situations throughout their life.
Especially if you do nothing.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. They tell you how much wiggle room you have. And, you know, so that's why some people have a ton of wiggle room, right? They have super stable upbringing and have like a ACE score of 1 or 0, or, you know, and they have really strong genetics, and they have a healthy lifestyle and a healthy diet. Right. And some kids don't. And it just tells you what your wiggle room is.
Right. Absolutely. So, you know, we talked about the biology of stress and why it's important to focus on stress response and resilience. And so what other things can you talk about that parents can, you know, rely on in order to help their children function better without necessarily going right to medications? To me personally, I think medications, especially in the very, very young ages of, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5, you know, like, medication should really be a choice of last resort. I think there's so many things that people can do before then. Certainly there's going to be the rare situation where, like, I think that sometimes you absolutely need to give medication, but I, you know, I think that it's important for parents to have resources, you know. So what other resources or what other tools do you think parents should take a look at that you have found to be pretty consistently helpful in helping their child regulate or get their health back?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the first thing is to shift this framework. There's nothing wrong with your kid. Your kid is responding to stress. So that's, if you know, if you don't want to rely on medication, or you don't feel comfortable going down that road, the question to ask is, okay, how can I figure out what these stressors are? And you've pretty much mentioned all of them, but I think of them in a collection of 5 things. There's nutrient imbalances, there's food reactions, there's toxicity and their capacity to detox, there's infections, and there's digestive imbalances. Right. If you look in those buckets, you will find the chronic stressors that are irritating the nervous system. And if you want to go one step deeper, if you look at them within the context of genetics and early childhood experiences, then you'll have a very strong picture of what's leading to these issues. And, just to just piggyback on what you said about medication, sometimes they're the pressure valve that you need, right? If you're in crisis, you need a good. And so what I would say is that if you're in that position, you're in this crisis mode and you're just like, I need a pressure valve, I just need something to stabilize, then the conversation with your prescribing doctor should be around that, right? Not around, I need a medication to fix a problem. It's, I need a pressure valve so that we can just all breathe for a second, but I do not intend for this to be a long-term situation. If this is, resonating, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I do think, a lot of doctors are receptive to that. Some have absolutely no sense of how to get someone off of a medication. It's just not in the books. Like once you're on it, you're going to stay on it. And some do not think that way, as you know, right? Some think, okay, it can be a pressure valve and then we're going to have a plan. But that's the doctor that you need if you want to do, because these two approaches of medication and what we would call maybe a natural approach, they're compatible. They're not mutually exclusive. But you do need 100%. People on the board who understand that.
Absolutely. I completely agree on that sentiment, because I talk about using medications to sort of be the cast. Let's say if it was a physical problem, right, where you got hit by a car and you had multiple broken bones, you're not going to just walk away from that. And if you have internal bleeding, of course, you're going to say, please take me to the hospital and give me surgery and put these bones in the cast. But you know fully well that you'll be coming out of those casts, right? And doing physical therapy, or going to rehab. And in my mind, I think mental health should be treated the same way. That medications are used in a crisis situation to stabilize and to begin the healing process while you're looking for those root causes and rectifying them, reversing them and rectifying them so that you can be tapered off of those medications. And I've seen that happen countless times. No problem.
Yeah. That's such a great way to put it. Such a great way to put it. I get nervous around it when, like, I think of, there's a trifecta of things that your kid really needs to be doing every day well for them to self-regulate and feel good. And they're eating, sleeping, and pooping. If they are not eating, sleeping, and pooping, you're going to have a heck of a time trying to help them self-regulate their nervous system. Right. And so I get nervous when medications interfere with one of those three things, because now you're undermining the body's healing capacity, and you're more likely to get stuck in that cycle of medication. Right. So that's where I like, that's a big red flag for me. If you're having a conversation with your doctor about, I want to do this for a short period of time to give us a pressure valve. If one of the side effects is affecting their eating, their sleeping, or their pooping, have another conversation about, can we switch this up? Can we try something different? Because those are so important for you to be doing at the same time.
Agreed. Completely agreed. Yeah, it's because SSRIs, which is a class of medications, a class of antidepressants, which help with depression and anxiety and OCD, can absolutely cause loads of gut symptoms, ranging from diarrhea to constipation, nausea, upset stomach, loss of appetite. It can also cause insomnia, or sleep disturbances. So there is a range of side effects of that class of medications, and there's side effects from other classes as well that can affect the gut and the sleep cycle as well.
And appetite too, right? Kids stop eating if they're on some of the stimulant meds.
Absolutely. Right. So, and as you're mentioning it, as you were talking about this trifecta, what occurred to me is that even before they have mental health issues, you can predict that at some point they may start having mental health issues if they're not eating, sleeping, and pooping properly, right?
Yeah. I mean,
age too,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and these are the core things that help resilience. We're talking like what builds resilience? Well, skills, yeah, all that good stuff, good, strong relationships, all that good stuff. Biology, like good, strong biology, eating, sleeping, and pooping. And so, the picky eating and the constipation and the insomnia and the night waking and the night terrors, there are stages of development where for a short period of time, maybe they have a little blip with that. But if it's consistent and it's one of those things that is so common. These are a collection of things that are so common that they're considered normal. But like you say, absolutely, they are predictive of issues to come. And when I work with older kids, we do their full history and we trace it back. They're always coming up, those things.
Yeah, that would be a great research topic. Somebody's got to do research on that to how predictive it is. That would be a wonderful.
Yeah, well, I've got a whole bunch of records of my notes to donate to that study because I definitely see this as predictive. Or there was like an event, like a surgery or a traumatic event or something, and then this cascade started. But for a lot of them, it started right from the get-go.
Absolutely. Retrospective studies using records, but prospective, even figuring out, okay, all right, you have these issues. Let's see how long it takes for you to have mental health problems. But anyway, it's like my mind starts going,
Yeah, but let's also say that the kids, this question of like, are kids resilient? Kids are resilient in that they are programmed to grow and develop and feel good. Like that's in our biology. Mm-hmm. We just have to get all the other junk out of the way. We have to get all that toxicity out of the way and all this stuff. And if you can do that, then you can stave off the issue. So it's not like, oh my gosh, my kid was constipated when they were 2, now they're gonna be depressed when they're 15. Not necessarily. But there are definitely some proactive things you can take if you're starting to see this when your kids are very little.
Absolutely. I'm really glad you said that. Really good, because that is so true. It is something that, and there haven't been any studies, but I have the same experience that at least the people who do come in to see me, it's been going on for a while. So in retrospect, and we see these narrowed populations, right, of people who have been suffering for quite some time. So,
but I do love it when families come into my program and they're like, like things are okay, but I really struggled with this when I was a kid, and I just want to make sure that everything is okay because I'm seeing some like early issues, and we run some labs to see, and sometimes we find some pretty interesting things. Sometimes we're like, wow, their child's really under a heck of a lot of oxidative stress. We got to figure out what's causing that. Or, wow, look, you've got like a parasitic infection you didn't know about, or H. pylori you didn't know about, and that could lead to some problems. It's not right now, but I love working with that kind of a family because they're just being really proactive and they just want to stave off problems, and that that's great.
Yeah, especially in this world where we're surrounded by stressful things and a toxic environment, given what we're surrounded by chemicals, we're surrounded by off-gassing, right?
Mm-hmm. Could you imagine if everyone, like at around maybe age 7 or 8, every family was offered this suite of functional tests to see like, how is your resilience? Like how are things going in there? Is everything going according to plan, like before they have symptoms? Could you imagine how much healthier a population we would have?
I know, and maybe that would drive a change in our food industry
and our lifestyle factors. I mean, I see lots of changes in people's parenting strategies and in their choices at the grocery store when they see on paper, like, oh wow, look what's going on inside the body. Okay, I need to make different choices. It sets a whole different cascade of things in motion that translate to the kid, and the kid is going to end up being healthier for it, not only because of what you're doing there, but because of the messages that you're teaching them about taking care of their body.
Yeah, well, knowledge is power, certainly. Yeah. So what are some of the strategies, and we'll end soon but I would love to know what your strategies are in terms of handling stress, emotional stress directly and getting the body to calm down? What are the tools that you usually recommend for your kids?
Well, like the immediate kind of acute issue stuff.
To settle their nervous system
Hmm.
on a day-to-day basis.
Well, I think of actually three things on a regular basis. I think nourishment, like they need good whole food.
Mhm.
They need simplicity.
Mhm.
We just need to declutter and simplify. And they need strong connections with their parents and with other adults. And so I mean, that's kind of theoretical, I suppose. We can talk about some tangibles, but those are the things I think about on a daily basis with my kids too. It's like when things are falling off the rails and I'm like, oh my gosh, everyone is like, you know, we're living up here right now. Those are the things I think of. It's like, okay, how can I nourish these kids? How can I simplify our life right now? And how can I connect with my kids?
Those are great.
And that changes my decisions about what I'm going to do in the day.
Mhm. No, that's
From a
great. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it brings up what I always did with my all three of my children are in their 20s now, so my youngest is 23. But I always made sure that we had dinner together. Having dinner at least 5 days a week at the table, no phones on the table, just the five of us having
Mhm.
dinner and not talking about anything stressful. Like,
Hard to do.
did you do this? Did you do that? What's tomorrow?
Yes.
Rapid fire questions. We would have conversations about completely things a show that you watched or something funny you saw or
Mhm.
something
Mhm.
interesting, some interesting fact, and we
Mhm.
would, or just my husband is a history buff, so he'll always bring up things that he was reading about in a book and tying it into his own life. And
Mhm.
it's a great way to get to know your kid on a different level and them to get to know you as a human being, as a person that has strengths and weaknesses, that the mistakes that you've made and how you thought about it, how you change your life, because then you're a model for your child, that it's okay to
Mhm.
make mistakes, that you can learn from them, how you pivoted from one thing to the next, and they'll say, I didn't know that about you.
Yeah, yeah. And if kids are little and too young for that kind of thing, then just games. I mean, games at the table and laughter is so important. Having a few nights a week that are game nights,
Exactly.
right? Board games are fantastic.
Yes.
And like all of this really speaks to, on a like sciencey level, it speaks to co-regulation, right? We co-regulate with our kids. The nervous system, you can think of your home as having a nervous system. We have, each individual's has their own nervous system, but so does the home, and it's a compilation of everybody's.
Yeah.
And I often hear these, parents will say like, well, this one of our kids are just sucking the life, sucking the energy out of our home because they're so needy and they're so like we're walking on eggshells, or they're so anxious or what have you, right? And they don't want to connect. They want to just go in their room and like play video games or what have you. But if I can give a glimmer of hope in there, it's that we are wired for attachment. There is no question in my mind that your child wants to attach to you on some level.
Right.
It's just they're putting up the fronts, they're in that freeze response, or they're having a stress response of some sort, and finding those little inroads, those little ways to say, I'm here, I'm connecting, I'm I'm regulating myself, right? Anything that you can do to bring them together, to regulate the nervous system of your home.
One thing that we did as a family is we always had a deck of cards on us, always. And we even had waterproof cards, deck of cards. And we played cards in restaurants right there at the table. We're
Mhm.
waiting, we're ordering, we're waiting. We pull out the cards immediately and we play cards. And that settled. Remember, I was telling you about my child who needed three adults to watch him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He settled right down because he had something to focus on. It's really hard for a kid who is, he ultimately, we realized later that he had celiac disease. And because the whole reason I even am doing functional medicine is because of his physical and mental health conditions, and that really started with celiacs. But he wasn't able to settle his nervous system down, and we didn't find that out until age 14. But as a younger kid, just getting him to focus on the cards really helped to allow us to enjoy a nice meal in a restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
To this day, my kids are in their 20s, 23 to 28. We always play cards.
It brings up a really interesting point, because there is something very, very different between cards, getting a kid to focus on cards and getting a kid to focus on their iPod or their iPad, right? And that's what's happening now. It's like, oh, I just need my kid or even on their own coloring, right? It's like you have a connection point when you're playing cards with them that you don't have. I mean, screens and all of the things aside, when they're just like, we're just sitting them in front of their iPad at the restaurant because they need to focus on something, that is not helpful.
Right.
It's helpful in the moment to like as a pressure valve, but it's not helpful in the long term.
It's not
right. So, but a great alternative, cards are a fantastic alternative, or word games are really great. And if they are into coloring, if they're little, that's also, it is good and it's good for the brain. But if you can do it with them somehow, or like everybody do it together, or everyone have their own coloring, adds a whole different dimension.
It is. And that's the connection dimension. Right?
Yes. I love, I mean, I'm a nutritionist. And so my main tool is nutrition. And we talk a lot about nutrition in my programs, and eating the right foods for your biology and for your body. But I also believe that the food change, nourishment is not all about what we eat. It's not all about what we put in our mouth. It's also about how we connect and how we nourish our souls, and how we nourish these connections and move our bodies. And so if you need to start there because you can't change your child's diet, or they're super picky, or it just terrifies you to think about, like, what am I going to cook if they can't eat bread and pasta? That's okay. You don't have to start there. You can start with some of these other connection type nourishment pieces. You'll get there eventually.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, I can talk to you about this forever, Jess. These are just great conversations. And I keep thinking, oh, we have to talk about this. And we have to talk about
I know. We'll have to do part 2. Yeah.
Really exciting. But I think this is a great episode. And hopefully people will be encouraged to seek you out and, get help for their children if they're experiencing what we've been talking about, and learning more about you. And that there is another way, guys. There really is. There's absolutely other ways to get what your child needs. Okay. Well, I will send them to your website, and I know you have a free seminar, like you mentioned, and there was a book bonus as well, and that'll all be in the show notes. So look for that, everyone. And so I appreciate everything that you have talked about. And guys, if you're interested in what I do, the parents that are working with Jess for their child, if you need any assistance in your mental health issues, check out my boot camp. Okay.
Awesome. Yeah. They're so connected. Very
much connected. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.